This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I speak with Yuri Cataldo, a Boston-based entrepreneur, designer, and director of the Creative Entrepreneurship program at Emerson College. And he talks to me about creative entrepreneurship and how to take that journey from being an artist to being a creative entrepreneur. Enjoy this episode. Hey, it's James Taylor. I'm delighted today to have Yuri Cataldo. Yuri is a Boston-based entrepreneur, designer, and director of the Creative Entrepreneurship program at Emerson College. After training at Yale in set and costume design, he founded Indigo H2O, a multiple award-winning bottled alkaline water, which recently won Best Tasting Water in the World. Indigo H2O has been featured at the Oscars, the Golden Globes, the Emmys, and in 60-plus magazines. Yuri himself has been named as one of the 40 under 40 business leaders in his home state of Indiana for his work bootstrapping Indigo H2O, and today he lectures at Princeton, Stanford, and art and entrepreneurship conferences. You can hear him each week when he hosts his podcast, Advance Your Art, which focuses on the journey from artist to creative entrepreneur. It's my great pleasure to have Yuri on the show today. Welcome, Yuri.
Hi, James. Thank you so much for having me.
So share with our listeners what's going on in your world just now.
Oh, so many things. So right now, as you mentioned, I am based out of Boston, but I'm currently sitting in Sarasota, Florida, because as most artists, I can't just do one thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm working with a theater company right now, and I designed the costumes for their production. So I'm working on that, and that will happen. That will actually come to an end in August, and then I go back to Boston. So there's that. There's the podcast that I recently launched that you mentioned. I launched that in June, so that's something I'm focused on. And then throughout this entire time, I am still building up the program for Emerson College. So I spent a lot of time chatting with our incoming students, reaching out to mentors for the program, and finishing up the design of their first year experience.
And so are these students that are coming on art programs or fine art programs, and this is the entrepreneurial component? Is that how it works?
Yes, this is the entrepreneurial component. Particularly with this program at Emerson, it's unique in that I'm already taking what Emerson does really well. So it's students who primarily want to focus in the arts because that's what Emerson is really good at. And we're taking what they do in the arts and we're combining it with some of the teaching and classes in the marketing program, and then designing specialty classes that help weave both the art and entrepreneurship and marketing sides together in terms that artists are familiar with.
Because that's actually quite unusual in arts programs. A lot, and I travel around, I speak to a lot of people who've either just left universities or colleges, or are at them just at this point. And one of the thing I hear time and time again is like they say, they're just not teaching us how to do the business part of, they're teaching us all the skills in terms of how to be really good visual artists or performance artists or whatever the thing is they're learning, but they're not teaching me any of the skills I really need in order to be able to make a living at doing this thing.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's that's the one thing I complained too when I went through my arts training, because I went to multiple art schools, and when the economy collapsed and suddenly what I wanted to do, which was be a professional set and costume designer, fell through, then it was like, oh, now what do I do? Because I don't know how to do anything else. So this is, as I always tell students, this is the program that I wish existed when I was in school. And I get that same thing from parents or from members of the Boston community or even others when they start hearing about this. It's that it's very unique, and that it does paint the picture, the full picture for artists on how to actually translate their art skills and create a living from that. And so we're not unique. There are other programs who do this, and it is more of a trend. but it's still not enough. There's only a handful of universities and colleges that actually do this.
So why do you think this maybe myth permeates then, that the creative person is just this person who locks themselves away, the lone creative genius, and gives all the business side of things, that has to go to someone else. They can't possibly do any of that stuff. They're too much of an artist to think about that. Have you any idea maybe where this thing kind of permeates from?
Well, I think it comes from a couple different places. Most recently, it's the idea of, I think the term of selling out, I think, is the best way to describe that, which is not necessarily something that is as prevalent to a younger generation because they're used to putting themselves out there more. But particularly even I remember when I was in art school, and I'm 36, so this is like early 2000s, the idea that suddenly you're making money from your art means that you just went commercial, and it was this dirty, like, money was looked at as a dirty, evil thing. And I think that a lot of artists and creatives, there's a disconnect between money as like a tool and then money as like this thing where they think if you have money, suddenly you become the next Donald Trump, which is not how it works at all. Like, money doesn't make you evil. It just emphasizes and brings out kind of what you already are. So there's a lot of that. And there's also the myth of the starving artist, which was perpetuated by, I can't remember the author right now, but there was a story that came out in the early 1900s, which then, became La Bohème, the opera, and then Rent, which is like, in order to fully be an artist, then you had to find that, I guess, the negative things inside you, where you had to just starve and grind it out, and somehow that made your art purer, which is, again, I think is a complete myth. There are a lot of artists, like look at Damien Hirst or even Weiland, two of the most successful artists in history, like living artists in history, who are very well off, who create artwork all the time and are like, yeah, money's fine.
Yeah, it's not the drive. I mean, you definitely saw that in Damien Hirst and a lot of the new British artists that came out, where they were financially very, very successful. It's not a driver for them, but what it did allow them to do was to get their art out to a much larger, and they were also that generation of thinking globally as well, thinking about a buyer in Shanghai as much as they were thinking about a buyer in London or New York. So there was a change that kind of went on there. I often speak when I speak at conferences. I talk about Giorgio Vasari, who wrote the book The Lives of the Artists, about Michelangelo and Da Vinci. And while it was an amazing book at the time, and he could open up a lot of people to what these artists were doing, it did kind of push the idea that there's a kind of lone creative genius, and that quietly dispensed of all the team of other people that were there to help support that artist as well. So you're working in theatre a lot, where the people that are actually up on the stage, they might actually be quite a small number of people compared to the overall company of people that are there to support them.
Oh yes, and definitely. In all, I guess and this is also, I think, comes through on entrepreneurs too. Like, they feel like they need to do everything, particularly in theater. So I'm the costume designer for this show. There's a team of 3 different people right now in a costume shop that help sew some of the garments for me. On top of that, there are stage managers and literary artists, and then the actors themselves, and then directors and assistant directors. The audience only ever sees the finished product on stage, but behind that, there have been dozens and dozens of designers and assistants and support staff that make everything possible.
So I mentioned you went to Yale, you went and studied set design, theatre design as well. But where did you really, once you kind of left there, where did you really kind of develop and learn your craft?
So I learned the craft. It's been an evolution. So I first had the idea and started actually, I take that back. The first idea and the craft of design, or even fabrics, came from my grandfather. He was a Russian immigrant, and he had to create his own life because he and my grandmother came over as refugees during World War II and escaped Stalin and had to start over from nothing. And he created his own life for himself and found his craft as a upholsterer and a furniture designer. So my mom likes to tell stories about how I used to sit by his side and watch him work with fabrics and design furniture, which then eventually kind of translated for me into being an engineer for a little bit, and then over to costume and set design. And it's just, I spent, from the age of 20 until 28, speaking to other designers who were working on Broadway and movies and learning from them as mentors, as well as hours and hours and hours of just practice. So practicing my sketching ability, practicing my artistic ability, color theory. So there wasn't really a one class type of thing. It was an evolution of at least 8 to 10 years of just doing it every single day for hours and hours and hours that helped me go from having no idea what I'm doing to somebody who was very competent as a designer.
But then you did something interesting. You did what in Silicon Valley they would call a classic pivot. And you moved into the bottled water business. Not the first place you think you go from theatrical design. So how did that come about?
Sure. I get asked that a lot. And to me, it makes perfect sense. But I started a bottled water company out of necessity, which sounds very bizarre. But I, unfortunately, at the age of 29, I was working for multiple Broadway shows. I was assisting a movie producer and doing my own design projects. And then suddenly the economy collapses in New York City and I go through a divorce. So suddenly, everything that I thought was secure in my life all went away. So I end up moving back to Indiana, only thinking that I could be a designer, and then trying to struggle. Moved in with my parents. I struggled to find work to pay for bills, and that wasn't happening. So I was like, I have to do something else. So I talked my way into a couple of other jobs and things, and one of which was sales for a TV station. And I spent a lot of time working with small businesses. And I realized quickly on that what they were doing, small businesses and what they were figuring out, I was like, oh, I already kind of do this when I was a costume designer in theater. I should start a company. And I've always been fascinated by bottled water. That's just my own thing for a long time, and there's health reasons to why, but bottled water fascinated me. So I woke up one morning. Actually, I was in Florida on vacation with my parents. I woke up one morning and I went for a jog, and I was jogging on the beach trying to think about, my life, where it's headed, what am I going to do? And I wasn't paying attention, and I stepped into a hole that someone had dug, and I sprained my ankle. It's the first day of our vacation. So I hobble home, and then my ankle swells up, and then I'm like, great, now what am I going to do? I end up hobbling to a bookstore, and I buy a used copy of The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And I sit down and I read it cover to cover in one night. And the next day I was like, you know what? I'm starting a company. I know how to do it now. I like bottled water. I know a lot about it. Let's just do it. So when I came back to Indiana a few days later, I just launched the company. So it helped out that some very good friends of my parents, they basically have become venture capitalists now, but they have a consulting firm where they work with people and help them start up their websites and businesses. And I had no idea how to do any of that. I just knew I wanted to start a bottled water company. So I chatted with them. They gave me some great ideas. They helped me out more than I ever can imagine. They were fantastic mentors. And we created a basic site. This is before I even knew how to do any of this. We created a basic site. I mocked up what the bottle would look like, some of the verbiage, and we just put it out there to see what would happen. And a couple weeks later, I got a bunch of sales, and I was like, great. So I'm selling water. I don't know how to. Now I actually figure out how to do it. So,
so you'd actually kind of pre-sold the water before you'd even created the product.
Yes, because I also didn't have any money. So I was like, and I talked with them about this. I was like, is it a good idea to start something when I know I don't have any funds? And they're like, well, let's test your idea first and see if you actually have a market for it. So I pre-sold the water, and then from those initial sales, I was able to buy bottles and work out the rest of the details.
And that's a very kind of bootstrappy kind of way of building a business. Obviously, Tim talks about that in the book as well. About, I think he mentioned about the authors in the 50s that they would come up with 4 ideas for 4 different books, take out an ad in some magazines, say to people, send me $1 for whichever book you want to order. They would wait until all the dollars came in. Whichever ones had the biggest pile, that was the book that they would write. Send the rest of the money back, and then they would write. So they were. But obviously now you can do this with Google ads, Facebook ads, and as you were just saying, you can basically kind of pre-sell, and crowdfunding is obviously another way of kind of doing that at the same time. So you when you were doing this, when you were kind of restarting, you were kind of starting from scratch doing this. What were other people saying around you? Were they saying you are completely mad, or were they very supportive of what you were doing?
So my parents are very supportive, and I have to give them tremendous amount of credit for helping me restart my life. But yeah, like it's what I was doing was the blunt of many jokes. So like friends I had. Even like my other family members, they joked about it. Most of my family is in the restaurant business, so I create this water. It's very, very fancy, and the other part too, I should definitely throw out there, is I did a lot of research on the FDA guideline wise, so all of that was taken care of. I was legit. I wasn't just
safe and everything.
Yeah, I was safe and everything in that sense. But they would joke like, "Oh, Yuri's, there's Yuri's bathtub water." So yeah, the sad thing is I couldn't, my family, my immediate, so my parents were very, very, very supportive, but outside of them, it was kind of a joke. Like, what is this theater guy trying to start with bottled water? What do you know about bottled water? And why are you even bothering with this? Shouldn't you be designing things somewhere? So it's but
it's water's a very interesting product, isn't it? Because it's one of these things where we take it for granted, and I often think, especially with bottled water, it says the type of water you buy, it says more about you than it actually does about anything else. So like most people, they maybe pay for water, they can have as much water as they want to the tap at home, but yet when they're out, they will still, or even at home, they will still buy bottled water. And obviously a proportion of that is because maybe for health reasons or something like that. But I would imagine a lot of it is because of what it says about them, what they want to express about themselves.
Oh, definitely. And a lot of that is marketing. So, I'm not in the bottled water business necessarily anymore, but yeah, most of it is marketing. Most bottled waters are just recycled tap water, and there's a lot of like videos and TV shows and reports they've done about this on how like the quality of the bottled water, is it better than tap water? But you're right, it is. When you're out at the restaurant, and particularly some restaurants are really good at this, of having people who are trained to come and talk about bottled water and again, it's a lot of it's marketing, but a lot of it is, yes, let's get this fancier water for right now because it's going to make me feel better right now.
And so now you're in the world of obviously entrepreneurship, continually thinking up new ideas for new projects, new things that you want to do. For you personally, where do a lot of your new ideas come from? Where do you kind of go to get inspiration?
I go a lot in nature. Honestly, to get inspiration, I like taking lots of walks, which gets difficult in Boston in the wintertime because it's really cold. And Boston, like the wind, so I've only been in Boston for a year, and I didn't realize how bone chilling the wind gets in because it's right off the ocean. No one ever really tells you about it. It should, I know that in San Francisco, the fog has its own name. I feel like the wind should have its own name because it just knocks the wind out of you. No pun intended. But yeah, it's oftentimes, so inspirations I get for ideas for whatever it is I'm working on often come from me walking around or doing something completely different. It's also why I like to do more than one thing. So like, for example, like this show I just designed, I was hired more at the last minute. So I have to read the script, come up with what best represents the characters clothing-wise to bring out their personality, to make it easier for the director to do their job and for the audience to get it. And it's hard to just sit down and go, okay, great. I know this about the characters, now design it. That's not quite how my mind works. But if I am reading a book, going for a run, sometimes working on like writing a paper, doing something totally different, suddenly a word or an idea will pop into my head and I'll go, that's brilliant. Like that makes so much sense then for the character, and I'll have to stop and then like write it down somewhere or switch and start doing a sketch. But it's like ideas come, it's like I let my unconscious mind incubate, and I try not to force something unless absolutely necessary.
And so are you always carrying around a notebook with you somewhere to just kind of quickly capture those ideas as they come to you?
I do. I have a notebook. I also have, I use Evernote a lot, and I've got an app on my phone. And the great thing about that is I can speak to it. So if I have an idea, like I'm running or doing something else, I'm like, I open the app, hit the talk button, and I talk into it. It's Siri isn't 100% accurate on my voice, but the idea is there enough so that I understand what I meant.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't get British voices. I've tried it. I've given up now. So, so this, you mentioned there the obviously the incubation stage, the preparation, the incubation stage, and then you have that kind of insight. You have these ideas. The next stage, I know for a lot of, especially folks in the arts and the creative industries, is a difficult one. That evaluation stage. So having ideas is often not a big issue. It's how they decide which of those ideas is worth pursuing. So for yourself, how do you, when you have all these ideas and you've got all these things you could possibly do, how do you what's your kind of filter, your way of saying, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on, or these are three things I'm going to focus on?
So that's something that's taken me a longer time to develop, and that's the realization that I only have so much time, and yes, while I can come up with ideas for everything quickly, I only have so much time to implement them or to focus on that. So I usually just focus on what excites me the most overall, and the thing that I know that I can spend at least, I guess they say the most amount of time working on, because sometimes this is like an idea for a class that I want to teach, or it's an idea for a project that my students should work on, or, in my own case, like the idea for the podcast. The idea for the podcast came like a year before I actually could figure out how to do it. So it just comes down to what I want to focus on and what I know I will work on without getting entirely distracted.
And when you're working with these students now, when you're teaching them as well, I would imagine it must be quite difficult when you hear someone's idea, a student's idea, and you can see huge value in it, to be quite easily maybe almost distracted and want to go down that rabbit hole with them all the way and really help them make that thing into reality, when you maybe have a different kind of role there at a university. So how have you managed to kind of get that sorted out in your head, so that between the projects that you do and also the projects your students are coming to you with all the time?
So yes, actually, that's, I think also one of the great opportunities I have is that because I'm surrounded by so many young minds who are just now discovering entrepreneurship, that they come up with these ideas that I probably never would have come up with at the same time. Also, they're very connected to what's popular and what's of the time, which is not, I'm not that cool. So it's great to hear about their ideas and where they come from. But it's this delicate balance that I have to do on allowing them to kind of push the idea and let it incubate on their own and just guide them through it. And also, it's the idea of knowing and speaking with them and to find out if this is something they actually want to do, or if it's just they like coming up with the idea and they just want to stop. Like for example, I taught a class last semester that was more of an introduction to entrepreneurship, and we on purpose had them create paper projects without, the idea with that project was, you've never done any of this before. We're basically going to tell you and show you how easy it is to come up with an idea. And if you were going to start a company, on how the first part is the easiest, and that is like coming up with the ideas and the research. And then the next part of actually implementing it, that's where the true art of that comes from. So a lot of the students, again, were very excited. They went through all this process, and a lot of them were like, you know what, great, I came up with this idea, I have an idea for a company, but I don't want to go on to the next level. So in a way, they're kind of self-selective in that way.
That's their filter.
Yeah, that's their filter of you find out the ones who want to actually do this. And those are the ones that I then help go on to the next level. And I let the ones who are just like, you know what, I just want to play business for right now, let them do what they want to do in that sense.
It reminds me a little of a story I heard the other day where they were talking about a writer who was a very successful writer who was doing a reading in some store. I think it could have even been in Boston or New York, and they were doing the reading, and someone stood up and they put their hands up to ask a question. He said, "You and I are the same age." I think this writer was about 50. "You and I are the same age. We went to the same college, arts college. We've been writing the same thing, but I've been writing nonstop. You've been writing nonstop. You've had all these huge successes. I'm getting nowhere. What do you suggest I do?" And then the person, the famous author, thought for a second, and he turned around to the person and he said, "Give up." and it so shocked the room, because obviously you don't expect it. You expect just keep trying. That's what you normally hear. And so this author said, "Give up." And he left it a couple of seconds, and he said, "But if after a year you find you just can't stop writing, you have to go back to write, you're a writer. That's what you need to do." It's that thing of just like sometimes you just have to kind of take a step back from the project, and if you just think, I can't do anything but do this, that's what you're meant to do anyway. So when you're being asked now, when you're at an event, you're at a bar or something, someone says to you, "So Yuri, what is it you do?" How do you respond to that? My
reply is, I teach artists how to be entrepreneurs. And that's like my canned response.
That's your line as well. And so in this time that you've been now teaching artists to be entrepreneurs and to kind of make a business around what they're trying to do as well, can you tell us about a time, either from your history or the stuff you've been doing with them, where you've worked on a project, you've given it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason it just didn't work out like you'd hoped? And more importantly, what were the lessons that you took away from that experience?
Sure. Well, the biggest instance that comes to mind actually is the death of my bottled water company, which happened a year ago. And actually that was right before I was hired to come to Emerson. And that's when I kind of made the switch over. But so I built this bottled water company from scratch. And in 2015, it was named the best tasting water in the world. And it had won 3 other awards before that and been featured, as you mentioned in the intro, at dozens and dozens of places and in high areas. And it happened in March. So in February, I had won the award for best tasting water in the world, and I was featured the same weekend in the gift baskets at the Oscars. So this was huge in my entrepreneurial life. Like, this was like the best time ever for my company. Sales, I'm also really good at marketing and publicity. So I had gotten a bunch of news stories the week before and the week after. I, at the time, was in dozens of Whole Foods in the Midwest, and I was getting them to allow me to do interviews on camera with TV stations in Whole Foods, which they don't allow you to do. But it was great. Like, I was driving traffic to certain Whole Foods locations, and I had an effect on their bottom line that week. It was like, that was amazing. Sales were increasing. Things were going very well. And then I get a phone call. Actually, I got an email on my I was also at the same time a professor at Indiana University teaching set design. So on my Indiana University email, which was so bizarre because I never usually check it, I got an email from a state health inspector talking about the permits that I had and how we needed to have a conversation. So I call him up, go through a big, long process, and it turns out that the state of Indiana decided that because of all the publicity I was getting, that they felt that I was a larger company than what I was claiming. And so I needed to be at a higher level of bottled water regulations than what they had agreed to when I first started the company.
Not based upon actual sales, not based upon any your big multinational or anything like that, just based upon that you were doing a good job of marketing.
Yes, I was doing a very good job of marketing, and to a certain extent, I was doing a really good job of creating the illusion that my company was much larger than what I claimed it to be. I mean, honestly, like the reality behind it was I was a one-man band in that sense. I had some assistants to help me bottle some things, and I had an assistants to help me do and run sales. But yeah, it was mostly just me. So I hire a beverage attorney, very, very nice gentleman. And he looks at all the case and he's like, Yuri, I have no idea what they're talking about. I think you just pissed somebody off. And so we spend a couple of weeks going back and forth. And it comes down to like suddenly then all these weird fines start happening, like noise violations that happen. Like I get citations for noise violations on a Sunday afternoon. Like that's when they cite. And I'm like, first off, nobody was even around at Sunday. And secondly, my bottled water facility was in my parents, like on my parents' property in the middle of nowhere. So there's nobody around. So, we go through all this process and my lawyer's like, listen, you are 100% correct in that you are completely compliant with the law, but that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is you made somebody mad and they want to make an example of you. So you can fight with the state of Indiana, which will cost you probably more than what your company's bringing in and put you in great amount of debt. And even if you win, there's no guarantee that they're going to come and let this go, and they'll come after you again and again and again. Or you can just close the company and then move on to something else. And it was a really like that moment was a really difficult one for me because I had spent 4 years of my life focused on building this company. This was, again, the pinnacle of my entrepreneurial success. I had just hired a sales team. Like I could see like investors coming in, like this was fantastic. And at that moment to realize that I had to just shut everything down and it was beyond my control and I had to just let that go. So it just, it reminded me of a couple other times in my life, like, like when the economy collapsed the first time and I had to switch over or when I went through a divorce, like these were just times in my life where suddenly you just get hit. Like it's a punch to the stomach that you weren't expecting, that suddenly then you have to then realize that what you were doing and what you were succeeding in, you can't do anymore. So now you have to figure something else out.
And what pulled you through that time? For a lot of people, these would almost be, even on their own, they would be knockout blows almost. They would say, that's it, I'm just going to go get a safe job, 9-to-5 job, and not do this entrepreneurship thing. It's just, I want out. What kept you going?
Sure. So there is in the process of like going after my divorce and everything else, I got into Stoic philosophy a bit more and started reading a lot about Seneca and Marcus Aurelius. And in a way, and actually even like before that with theater training, you kind of realize that there's nothing 100% concrete. I could wake up, like right now, I could wake up this morning and I could get an email from the director and she says, hey, you know what? I decided last night to go with a whole new way. So this is what we're going to do. And then suddenly I'll have to scrap everything I've worked on and start over. So it's not something, it's something that I wouldn't say inoculated myself to, but it's something that I'm a little more used to. And then it's just, a lot of it just comes down to looking at perspective. Like it's, you have to keep moving and you have to keep going. And I also have realized that, I've been broke before and I have had to restart before. And so I'm used to it. It's not something that I like to do, but it's not something that I'm scared of. So in that moment, I took a very deep breath and I, screamed and yelled and kept going. And the funniest thing is I gave a lecture about this to some entrepreneurs about how to start over. The funniest thing happened. So in that moment, I'm driving home from my lawyer's office to my parents' house thinking, okay, great. Now what am I going to do? And this goofy song comes on called Closing Time from Semisonic. And the very last lyric is, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And I'm like, oh my God, the stupid band from the 90s. That's exactly, like, that's it. Like, okay, so this door closed. I have to now, okay, so this door closed. Now what am I going to do? And let's look at this in a logical way. And, it helps that at that same time, I already had been lecturing about the combination between art and entrepreneurship. But that door closes, and then I come across the position at Emerson, which I was like, this is great, cool. No more bottled water. Now let's go on to the next phase of my life and learn from that.
So again, it goes that stoic thing of not becoming overly attached to the outcome. You basically you're saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give it everything I've got, but there is. I think that in Marcus Aurelius they would call it like fortuna, and they would. It's like you're going to have stuff's going to happen. You can't really, and it's what's more important is how you react to that. So it's like whether you get that amazing 5-star review of something or whether people say it's absolutely terrible. It's not the point, really. It's are you doing as well as you possibly can? Are you kind of striving to produce the best product or build the best business or be the best person that you possibly can? So not getting overly attached to the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Which is it's a very difficult thing to do, and I'm not great at it, but it's something I definitely work on over and over and over again. Is you're right, try not to be reactionary to things.
And in this creative journey you've had, can you tell listeners about an insight or a light bulb moment in your life where you've gone, okay, this is maybe the direction I need to be going with my life or my work, or this is a key distinction that I've recognized?
The biggest insight, I guess, most recently that happened was when I figured out the combination between art and entrepreneurship, and it happened simultaneously in like 2 different areas of my life, because I had just started the bottled water company and it was going for a little bit, and that was something that I guess was just automatic to me, and I was like, okay, I'm not afraid to do this. Let me just do this. I had also been hired to be the set design professor for Indiana University in South Bend, Indiana. And I was sitting at our very first arts meeting of the year, and like one after another, the professors were going around the table talking about how they kept on hearing from their students who graduated 5 years ago or more. And their constant theme was these students kept on telling me, I never taught them, like they never learned the business side of it. They feel like they've wasted their education. They have never learned how to make any money from their art. And now they want to go back to school for something else, or now they're just waiting tables or something else. And this light bulb moment hit me at that time where I was like, yes, that's exactly what like my complaint was with my college. And I'm sitting in this room right now and I have figured out how to do that. I figured out how to go from being a classically trained costume designer to starting an international award-winning bottled water company. And to me, that journey made complete sense. Whereas when I tell people about it, they're like, what? So at that moment, I was like, well, why don't I just start like looking at what I did and how to connect the dots? And it also helps at the same time, I heard this wonderful lecture from Robert Greene, and he was speaking at Yale to a bunch of students, and he made this comment of how he felt that, I think it was Cal Arts, how he felt that the Cal Arts training was better entrepreneurship training than the people he was meeting coming out of an MBA program. And he gave a couple of examples, mostly in the idea of politicking. Mm-hmm. So learning how to get someone on your side and learning how to then adapt to the room, which is something you have to do in like every single one of my art classes, because there's no right or wrong way to do art. Like if you're doing a painting, or in my instance, set or costume design, there are thousands of variations that are technically correct. So it just depends on who at that moment you're speaking with, whether it's the director or in my case at that time, it was my main professors.
And you're creating something from nothing, and you have to create you have to storytell to make people truly believe that thing is the case. So I would imagine that skill as an entrepreneur is extremely important, to be able to win people over to your business idea, or whether it's an investor or a customer, to have that strong kind of narrative line is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely, and that's actually one of the keys to artists selling their work. Like, so I sold some paintings that I don't paint so much anymore, but people buy the story behind it. That's actually why Damien Hirst is so successful. He figured this out a long time ago. He figured out that what was equally as important as his artwork is the marketing and the selling and the story behind it, and that's what people buy.
So why do you feel? I mean, maybe this is changing now because you're at the coal face of it. But why do so many people in the arts, and I'll also say in music as well, and other kind of creative industries, why do they park their creativity when it comes to the business side and the entrepreneurship side? So they have all this creativity in designing and innovating and thinking about what the product, what the thing is, but when it comes to doing the marketing and selling, they go to some 1950s way of marketing and selling, and not using that creativity that they have naturally.
I think part of it is just it's what they've, I think, learned from others. Like when you look up other artists, you look at how other people have done things. It's a fortunate trend that's happening that people learn from. I also think part of it is just a little bit of a disconnect, that it's not, I don't necessarily know or believe that it's a natural thing to suddenly realize that what you're learning in one thing is how you should be doing another. So, just because you're very creative, an artist, I don't think it naturally comes to your mind that you can use that creativity to solve a problem somewhere else and do it in sales and things. So I think a lot of artists probably get caught up in the like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't really have a lot of great examples out there, so I'll just kind of do what my friends are doing, what other people around me are doing. And you're right, a lot of that is, antiquated sales techniques, or not even that. That's just like I'll paint this or I'll build this, and then the audience will come to me.
Yeah.
And they'll find me. It's not the other way around.
I mean, that's why people like Tim Ferriss you mentioned earlier, I think are great, because to me they almost take a more of a punk attitude, a DIY attitude to things. I'm gonna do this, and sometimes it's more about the attitude that they're trying to get across. The skills bit will come, but they know what they want to get out. They know that they have a voice. And I'm gonna do it. I don't care what anyone else says. I'm just gonna put it out there. So that punk ethos, I think is great, because it just it gets rid of a lot of the usual nonsense that MBA speak that you can sometimes happen as well.
It does. It's, I think also with that is fear too. Like it's a lot of artists, and I found this a lot in my students last year, who some of them were marketing majors. It's being scared to do something that they don't feel they're qualified. So there's this idea that you need a piece of paper or something else that says you are this. So they're like, I'm an artist or I'm a marketer. I don't have that piece of paper or the perceived expertise to be anything other than that. So I think that also, like, that qualification, and that's where I think Tim Ferriss and the people are really good at. They're like, there's no such thing as being an expert in this, that a piece of paper is going to tell me that I'm not going to learn on my own. So I'm just going to do it. Yeah.
And what's the best advice that you've ever received about living a creative life and being fully creative and enjoying your creativity?
Well, the best advice I ever received about that was what prompted me actually to get into my creative life and actually do it. And so that advice happened while I was an engineer major at Purdue. So that's what I was originally doing. I was a mechanical engineer. I had worked for an automotive company and helped design a few things. And that's primarily with that was because that's what my dad wanted me to do, and it was a very safe way to go. So I remember sitting, I think it was my sophomore year in Purdue. I was in my fluid dynamics class and struggling immensely. And we had a guest lecturer that day who was a rocket scientist from NASA. And after his lecture, we're working on problems, and he's walking around talking to people. And I look at him, and he's like, Yuri, you look like you're struggling right now. What's going on? I'm like, I'm not really, I don't know why I suddenly opened up about my life. I'm like, I'm not really happy right now with this. Like, this class is difficult. I don't really feel like I belong with anybody here. Everyone's talking about working on their cars, and I was in a band at that time. Like, I just want to go make music and do something more creative. And he looks at me and he's like, well, that's great, Yuri. So why are you here? Why are you wasting your time when you know what you're doing won't make you happy at all? And so I look at him and I'm like, wait, what? Why? I don't know. I don't know why I'm here. He's like, well, then go figure out why you're here. And if it's not making you happy, then don't be here anymore. And so I left class, and the next day I dropped out of Purdue. And my parents are not happy about that at all.
I'm hearing this. If that NASA engineer is listening just now, it's all your fault. It's all your fault.
Exactly. I could have been an engineer.
You could have been an engineer. Well, there's plenty of engineers anyway, thankfully.
That's true.
Do you have, you mentioned Evernote recently, but do you have an online resource or a tool or an app that you really love?
There is. My favorite app and resource that I use right now actually is Fancy Hands. So they are a team of assistants that is basically like there's always someone available 24 hours a day. So I have a what's it called? A subscription with them. So I've got so many that I do a month, but I'm able to email them like tasks or things that I want to look up or people to contact. Even just like making schedules for myself. They are fantastic because it's everything that I ask for is done in like one particular app. And if the main person I use isn't available, then someone else does it. So Fancy Hands, they're wonderful. On top of like Evernote and a couple other things.
Awesome. I'll put people go to jamestaylor.me. I'll put these on the show notes as well. And if you could recommend just one book and one album to our listeners, what would they be?
Well, one book would definitely be Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And again, back with my Stoic thing. But I think I read that every single year. And what I love about that book is that it's, here is the most powerful person in the world, the Roman emperor. And it's just his like notes to himself. I don't think he ever met anybody to ever read it or come across it, but it's somebody with tremendous amounts of power writing about how to live a better life. And his insights are amazing. And particularly the one that always sticks in my head, which now Ryan Holiday wrote a book about, which is how to turn obstacles into opportunities. So looking at the issue and then you're like, okay, great, here's a problem. Now what do I do? Which I think is beneficial at all stages in your life.
And what would the album be? Or the record? Or it could be a song or an album. Song or an album.
Well, I always like to recommend my favorite album, and that's Radiohead's Amnesiac. And I can't exactly tell you why, but when I'm ever stuck in like creative work, I always put music, like when I do designs or something else, I always put music on in the background, and it's always actually it's either Radiohead or Tom Waits in the background. And it's something about the way that they approach music and their own unique creativity that helps influence mine.
Great. And we'll put these on the show notes as well. So let's imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you have the tools of your trade, your laptops, your notepads, whatever the tools are for you, and knowledge that you've acquired over these years, but you have no contacts, no one knows who you are. How would you restart things?
I would start by, actually I get that all the time. I would start by making phone calls. And I have a tendency of jumping into particularly industries where, again, I don't know very much about. So I would call people who were much more knowledgeable than I am in that field and ask them if I can help them, or ask them if I could take them out to coffee, and find out, again, who I could help the most and keep working that way. That's actually how I approach a lot of the projects and the new opportunities that I have, is just asking people how I can help them.
Awesome. Well, Yuri, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. I wish you all the best with the new projects you've got on the go. What's the best way for people to connect with you and learn more about what you've been up to?
Sure. So you can find me on see here. My website is yuricataldo@gmail.com, or even advanceyourart.com, both ways. And also on Twitter, I'm @ycataldo.
Great. I'll put all those links in the show notes. People go to jamestaylor.me, just type in Yuri Cataldo and you'll get all the links that we were speaking about on the show today. Yuri, I wish you all the best. Look forward to catching up soon, and it's great to see the journey that you'll be on. I think you're going to go on to greater and greater things.
Well, thank you, James. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.